Welcome everyone to Straight Science. Straight Science is an evening science presentation series put on by UAF Northwest Campus. We can show that now. And UAF Alaska Sea Grant. Both UAF Northwest Campus and Alaska Sea Grant are public servants of the Bering Strait region, which is the homeland and waters of the Inupiaq, Yupik, and St. Lawrence Island Yupik peoples. So tonight, you can't go wrong in the Bering Strait region having a talk that involves walruses. That's what we want to hear about. So we have the Sea Ice for Outlook program, for Walrus Outlook program. And this is a thing that's been really helpful, talking about sea ice, the weather, and walruses in the Bering Strait region, and other newsy bits, I'm sure. So tonight's speaker is Amy Hendricks. She is a climate scientist at the University of Alaska Fairbanks, and she's done a review of the Sea Ice for Walrus Outlook program. And she's going to tell us all about it, what she learned, and I think a lot of it may be relevant to lots of other topics in the area. And so we're going to have questions at the end, unless you want questions during.
Either works for me.
Either worked for her, so she's game. With that, I'll turn it over to Amy, and I'll let our audience member here know, in case you need to know the bathrooms, leave out here and take a right. And also, if for some reason you need to leave the building, run out the door and go either way.
Okay.
Exit signs at either way. Been a long time since I've had to remember that. With that, take it away, Amy Hendricks. We're so glad she's here, and we're so glad all of you are here at Northwest Campus. Take it away, Amy.
Great. Thank you, Gay. And just so I'll show my face, it does match what was on the flyer. That's me there. So thank you. Yeah, just like what Gay said, thanks for being here tonight. I really appreciate it. I'm excited to just share some of what I've learned through this project. And I'm a pacer, and so if you see me like leave the screen and come back, that's what's happening. I'm just walking around over here. So tonight I'm going to talk about the review of the Sea Ice for Walrus Outlook. And this was, of course, to support coastal resilience in the Bering Strait here in Gnome. And just to give you an idea of where this presentation is going tonight, first, since I'm not super limited for time, like I have been in the past, I'll give you a little overview about who I am and how I ended up here. And then I'll talk about the SIWO, give you a little background information on what that program looks like. And then what reviewing the SIWO, what that project was like. And then I'll lay out some key findings and some really good recommendations that I heard from folks, and talk about what's coming next with this project. And yes, I'm open to questions at any time if people just want to chime in. This is going to be real casual. And yeah, I appreciate any questions that you guys have. So just a little bit about me. The picture on the far, what side is this? Left, thank you. It's a picture of me and my Japanese grandmothers and my mom. So I was born in Okinawa. My mom is a Maminchu, so Southern Japanese Islander. My dad is white European farmer settler, grew up in Minnesota. And that's where I grew up as well. I grew up in Minnesota, watching the weather. We get really extreme tornadoes and squall lines, just really cool spring weather mostly. And so I was really inspired to kind of read the weather. When I was a kid, I used to tell my great-grandmother on gorgeous sunny days that rain was coming. She'd get so upset. She'd be like, no, it's not gonna rain. But sure enough, a couple days later, or maybe a day or two later, those cirrus clouds told me that rain was coming. So my undergraduate degree, I went to the University of Oklahoma. And the picture you see on the bottom, that's actually the first tornado that I ever saw as a storm chaser. Oh. Yeah, it was not supposed to happen that day. It was March 8th, 2010, but we got a tornado anyway. Very exciting, but I realized that I missed the North Country, and Alaska had always been calling to me. So I came up here up to Fairbanks for a master's in atmospheric sciences, and then just rolled into a PhD. A lot of my work has focused on climate impacts on vegetation growth in Southwest Alaska. So the greening of the Arctic and some interesting trends that have been seen across the Arctic, specifically in the Yukon-Kuskokwim Delta. So a lot of my work has taken me down to Bethel, which is actually the picture on the far right that you see, the last trip that I went down there on. One of the elders brought a big sheepfish and I was told to scale it. And I didn't know how to do that. So one of the elders had to teach me how to scale a fish with a spoon. And I wore a real fancy outfit that I was real proud of. And they had me scaling fish. So, and then this picture in the middle, that's my family up in Fairbanks. That's my husband, Jeremy, and we have 3 dogs, Boo, Solstice, and Mare. And we like to go skiing and hunting and rafting and just getting out in the outdoors. This is not actually the very first time I've seen Gnome, but it's the first time I've set foot in Gnome. I was on a Japanese research cruise in 2017 that came just outside of Gnome. We had to drop off the captain of the ship and some gear. And so Farley Marine was actually the group that came out and picked up the captain. And I yelled down if I could have one of their hats. And so they stuck it on one of the cargo hooks and sent it up to me on the big research vessel. So I've seen Gnome from a distance, and now I've seen it here in person. And Gay gave me an awesome tour around town, showing me some of the sites earlier today. So I was real thankful for that. All right. So getting into the Sea Ice for Walrus Outlook, and I'm going to call it the SIWO just for short. And something I don't have to tell probably any of you on this call, but the sea ice conditions in the Bering Sea over time have become far more unpredictable and far more dangerous to navigate, especially for subsistence hunting. And so this product, the Sea Ice for Walrus Outlook, is really unique in that it takes local observations from walrus hunters and former walrus hunters in the Bering Strait region, and it puts that next to, alongside of National Weather Service forecasts. And they give forecasts of the sea ice age, extent, wind forecast, temperature, really great satellite imagery of the region. And so you could see on the left is a picture from Marcus Barr up in, he's actually in Brevig Mission, I think this.
You could wait or whichever.
But you can see this beautiful picture, some gear out front, and he writes up this really great report about fast ice broke off about 50 yards and is closer right at the point of Cape Douglas. And so just any observation that local observers have, they can report, and hopefully that can be useful for other folks who are out navigating the waters and sea ice. There's some other really great information that comes up. Rick Toman, who's on the call here, is always providing really wonderful information. He has these annotated satellite images that come from ACAP up in Fairbanks and provides really nice written piece for them. So some opportunistic information is available here too when that comes up. And then during Typhoon or ex-Typhoon Merbok, the SIWO was really active as well, trying to get some information out to folks who are just trying to stay aware. So this is a figure showing kind of how the Sea Ice for Walrus Outlook works. So along the top, we have the inputs for what goes into it, and that's the local observation reports. And that comes in from 7 Bering Strait communities, so Brevig Mission, Diomede, Gamble, Gnome, Savunga, Shishmaref, and Wales. And then we also have the National Weather Service, both the Sea Ice Desk in Anchorage and the Weather Forecasting Office in Fairbanks, providing information for the SIWO. And then, like I showed on the slide before, some opportunistic information. So any relevant information will get loaded onto the Sea Ice for Walrus Outlook. And that's available on Facebook, which most people access through Facebook. It's also on its own webpage managed by Arcus. And there's an email reminder list. If you're not on it, I suggest you get on it. And every year, the local observers, there's an informal advisory team, the managers, And all the partners get together twice a year. So the SIWO is only available during the spring, during the spring walrus hunting season, typically mid to late March to mid-June or so. So there's a pre-season meeting that's to plan what get everybody on the same page about what the sea ice looks like. And since it is so dynamic and not the same across all of these different communities, each community is going to have a different start date depending on the conditions of the sea ice. And then at the end of the season in the summer, there is a meeting where people can kind of recap what happened over the last season, talk about any concerns that they had or things that they would want to look forward to in the next season. And then just a map showing you where those communities are with the little black dots. And then in the side image, showing the whole state, I highlighted where Fairbanks is and where Anchorage is, because that's where the weather forecasts are coming out of Fairbanks and the sea ice data is coming out of Anchorage. Are there any questions so far? I'm a teacher, so this is like, I have any questions?
That's wonderful. Speak up if anyone has questions.
None.
Okay.
So far.
Thank you. Great. All right, so what did I do about this project then? So the SIWO started in 2010, and here we are. This project specifically, I started in 2020, so that's a decade long. And really, the management and people in charge of the SIWO were curious, what's working well and where could they make improvements? So project goals here, the first one was to review the SIWO and learn about what works well and what could be improved, and hear from local observers, hear from the advisory team, hear from folks who are involved in the SIWO and get their perspective on it and provide recommendations. And then we had a second goal as well, and that was to identify broader lessons for providing information in coastal communities in Western Alaska. So what does the SIWO do? You know, it is a very unique program. So what are they doing to bring these two totally different knowledge systems together? And again, what's working and what could be improved? Couple of methods here. No, I guess I didn't point out any of the pictures, but all of the photos that you see in this presentation are from local observers for the SIWO. So Bugles Johnson is the local observer for Gnome, and I tried to find as many of his pictures as I could here. So that folks who are in Gnome might recognize, orient themselves a bit. So how did I do this project? I started off by doing a document analysis. So I went online, I did a Google search for all things related to SIWO and just analyzed those documents. And I got really good information about the history, about the context, about the motivations for the Sea Ice for Walrus Outlook. And that really helped to inform who I was going to talk to in the interviews. And so for the interviews, I had 13 folks. They were all fantastic. I spoke with local observers. I spoke with the informal advisory team, the SIWO manager and partners, and got some really good information there. And then I had a questionnaire, and we put that out on Facebook, as well as got in touch with tribal offices and had them help distribute the link for the questionnaire. And that helped to fill in some gaps and also get more information about how useful is the information in the SIWO, who's using it, for what reasons. And then this final part here, the outreach, that's kind of where we are right now, just getting the word out and talking about this project and hearing from the folks who may or may not use it, who are maybe new to it, and getting their feedback on it as well. All right, so I'm going to go over a few of the key findings here. And this is really, what did I learn from the interviews? What did I learn from the questionnaire? So a lot of what you'll see is feedback from the communities here. So for the users and the uses of the SIWO, we learned that the user group is quite diverse. There were hunters, there were folks who just live here that were using it, scientists were referencing it, natural resource managers, emergency service people. yeah, so kind of across the board, people using the information on the SIWO. We learned that the information is used for a lot of different purposes. The biggest one, people were using the SIWO just as a general reference. So what's going on in the region. People were also using it for emergency services, for their research and presentations. And then it was also interesting to hear how the SIWO was helpful. We learned that when people reference the SIWO, they're able to stay connected with their home communities. So maybe somebody who grew up in the area has since left, but they can still look at the SIWO and be like, oh, that's really exciting. This community got something, or oh, that weather looks bad. Glad I'm not there. People were also using the SIWO to learn about things that were relevant to walruses from the local observers. So learning about that traditional knowledge. And they were also saving time. All of this information is in one spot. So we have local observations, National Weather Service, forecasts, and other local opportunistic information all in one place, nicely packaged. So then we asked questions about the value of the information, and we learned that folks just really found a lot of value in it. You okay, Gabe?
Yep, I'll be back.
Okay.
I'm just gonna get a pencil.
We broke it down between the information and local observer reports that came from their own local community versus outside communities, and both of those were almost equally valuable. It was interesting talking to one local observer about how they will look at the observation report from a nearby community to get an idea of how the ice is moving and how, like, the timing of when the ice will be moving in their community so that they can go and prep the boats at the appropriate time. There was a pretty high value placed on information about sea ice. Satellite images were the most popular or the most important. Another local observer was talking to me about how they can actually tell the depth of the thickness of the sea ice just from these satellite images, like the colors. Thought that was incredible. These are very well trained eyes. As far as concerns for accuracy, we really didn't hear about any concerns for accuracy, but what we did hear about was the Sea Ice for Walrus Outlook is published once per week, Fridays at noon. And with something as dynamic as sea ice, that can change a lot in a week. And so there was some mention of the frequency of updating that information. Fortunately, the National Weather Service maintains their twice daily forecast updates on their own page. And so people can always reference the National Weather Service for the most up-to-date information. All right, well, we are talking about an information resource in Western Alaska. And so, of course, big thing is going to be, well, how are people accessing an internet-based tool? How are they accessing that information? And what I learned was the use of social media is massively important. Facebook really helps to get this information out. People are referencing that the most. And it's a really great two-way communication tool in the region. We learned that, information is shared across groups. We have hunters talking to resource managers. We have Bering Strait residents talking to scientists about the information that was in the SIWO. And then, of course, those barriers and challenges, the biggest one being internet. Internet is a huge barrier out here. What we didn't know before, what I didn't know, and was kind of surprised by was it seems like language was the technical language in the Weather Service forecasts may be a bit difficult to understand. And unfortunately, I didn't get a lot of feedback on what about the language can be difficult to understand and what might alleviate that. But just knowing that language can be a barrier is good to know. Another barrier to accessing it was really just people not having time. it's a very busy time of the season, everyone getting their boats ready, going out for hunting. So that makes sense that maybe time would be an issue. All right. Are there any questions so far? Okay. So going over some of the recommendations that I heard from folks and put together based on the feedback that I got on this review. And these recommendations are being given to the Arctic Research Consortium of the US, who manages the SIWO. And we'll be having a meeting to prioritize some of these recommendations and hear more from local observers and partners on what was talked about. So a couple of the recommendations here. The first one was to extend the SIWO season. Like I said earlier, it's about mid-March to mid-June, depending on the sea ice. I did hear from local observers that having information in the SIWO available at the start of the ice season would be helpful. People were talking about just knowing how the ice is forming at any given year, since it's so different year to year, can give them some really good info about how the sea ice might be in the springtime. People also talked about expanding the geographic area and communities. I heard through the questionnaire that places like Elam or Shaktoolik would be really good to have SIWO observers, since they have similar environmental concerns and subsistence activities. Coastal communities along the Yukon-Kuskokwim Delta were also noted as places to where the SIWO could expand. Additional information that would be useful in the SIWO, this one was kind of fun. People really would like to see ocean current information, and that was really great to hear because their new partner, the Alaska Ocean Observing System, I think, AOS, is providing some of those ocean current and speed forecasts. Other information that would be useful would be visibility. So if it was really foggy, having some information about visibility would be great. One thing I was kind of surprised to see, I had drones as an option, drone footage, and people were like, no drones, they disturb the wildlife. So people did not seem to care for the idea of drone footage in the SIWO. So another recommendation right now, the local observers are paid $40 a week for their observation reports. And from quite a few folks in the interviews, it sounds like perhaps that's not equitable or sufficient. One local observer talked about how sometimes taking an observation can take hours of facing the elements, of getting your snow machine warmed up so that you can head out and go get a good vantage point, get a good photo for the reports, and then uploading them, sending them in, writing the report. All of this can take quite a bit of time. So fortunately, it sounds like it's already happening, that stipend is going up. So I'm glad to hear that recommendation is already underway. I added this photo of a whale being taken because part of the reason that people wanted the SIWO season extended and the geographic area extended was to be able to expand the focus on marine mammals and other coastal species that can be indicators for sea ice or marine mammal activity. So it's not just for walrus. It could be for seals, it could be for whales, it could be for birds. Some other recommendations that came up, the first one here was to increase non-internet access points. And so that would be like paper reports that get posted at public buildings, local mercantiles, tribal offices, schools, post offices, things like that. So opening up the access, taking it from being 100% online to having some access offline. Folks even recommended broadcasting it over local radio waves or television stations. Like I mentioned before, the language seemed to be a bit of a barrier. And so finding a way to reduce the technical language in the SIWO would help to increase the use and the access of the information in the SIWO. Another really great recommendation was to engage with other observation networks. The LEO network was suggested as one option, but that would also expand the species that people are paying attention to and reporting on, and giving a more holistic picture of what's happening environmentally in the area. And the last recommendation here was, this was an unexpected recommendation, and that was to synthesize the local observations from the start of when the SIWO started back in 2010 to present day. And so that would be looking at all of the local observer reports and synthesizing that, talking about how the environment has changed, talk about how walrus has changed over the time. And this was important, especially important for one local observer I talked to who said that a report like that would be useful for their grandchildren someday if they were interested in reading about their local observations from their viewpoint. So this is just what's coming up in the future. We're kind of winding down on the evaluation or on the review of the SIWO and presenting these recommendations to the managing ARCIS. And so the ARCIS group will review the recommendations. We will be meeting again in Gnome at the end of March. I'm very excited to come back. And that meeting will be an all hands meeting for folks involved in the SIWO. It'll be the first one to occur. So I think most people showing up are very excited for this. And we'll have the opportunity to prioritize those recommendations. So from the people who offered them, having conversations about what recommendations are the most important or the most feasible, and getting more feedback on that. And then we also plan on sharing the lessons from this review in a peer-reviewed publication. And that's months down the road, but it is another way to get the word out. And I guess that talk was a lot shorter than I thought it was going to be.
No, it's all good. That's good.
But
we've got good discussion.
Great. So that was the findings and the recommendations. And this is just to thank the folks that were really involved in this project. Of course, the interviewees and the questionnaire participants, like the amount of information I got from folks was awesome. The conversations that I had with interviewees was fantastic to learn about what's important out here. Of course, the review team, that would be the PI, Nathan Kettle, Lisa Sheffield-Guy, who I see is here, Olivia Lee, Vera Metcalf with the Eskimo Walrus Commission, Gay Sheffield sitting here in the room, and David Holman. And this project was funded by Alaska Sea Grant, so thankful to them for the funding, as well as Alaska Center for Climate Assessment and Policy up in Fairbanks at UAF. And let's see. So, Koyana, thank you. If people have some feedback and want to get in touch with me, my contact information is on this slide. You can call, text, email me, whatever you would like. I'm on Facebook. I'm not very social media adept, but I do know how to message on social media if people want to talk to me that way. And I will leave it on this slide. I didn't know what questions people were going to have for me, so I said, fine, I'll throw out some questions if people want to respond to those. That's great.
So we do have a number of callers that will not be able to see the screen currently. So you may want to say your questions, give everybody something to think about if they're in phone land.
Yeah, that's really good insight. So the questions that I have for folks, if you're sitting there needing something to think about, was I talked about language and so how can language and scientific forecasts become easier to understand? What does that process look like? What do you need? Second question is, why is SIWO information useful after sea ice is gone? One of the questions that I had, well, I talked earlier about how SIWO information might be useful during the sea ice formation period, and that was explained by local observers why that would be important to understand the annual sea ice cycle. But we were curious, this question came up in the questionnaire, and so people didn't offer a written response on why. We know that the sea ice information would be useful after the sea ice is gone, but we don't know why. And then just kind of final overall overreaching question, like what would make the SIWO more useful for you? For those folks who are interested in using it or are quite familiar with it, is there anything that you can think of that would help make the SIWO more useful? So those are my questions, and now you can tell me your questions.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Amy. This is Gay. And we have several callers on the line. So if callers have a question, please unmute yourself, or you can text me at 434-1149, because sometimes the Zoom will keep you muted, it seems. And we'll give the floor to the callers first. In the meantime, this is a good time for everybody to give a little love to Amy Hendricks for her SIWO presentation in the chat box, or if you're really advanced, you can give I guess we should be clapping, but she knows we're smiling in front of her here.
They're shoving cookies on their faces.
Yep. Excuse me. And so if you put a little something in the chat box, that's always nice. It's never easy to be a public speaker. And so with that, does any of the callers have any questions for Amy, or about her presentation, or the questions she just asked about how language can become easier to understand? Why is SIWO information useful after the sea ice melts out or goes out? And what would make SIWO more useful? Feel free to unmute. And let's see if anyone else has a question, or feel free to join in. I know I've got a question, so maybe I'll, oh, go ahead. I heard somebody on the phone. Go ahead.
Cheryl.
Yep.
This is Cheryl, and I'm sorry, I didn't get where the SIWO information is posted. Is it on Facebook, or we have to look it up on the internet?
So you should answer, because it's also for those online. It was put in the chat. Good question, Cheryl, and I'm glad you're a caller and meant speaking up. So you didn't see that, but go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Cheryl. Appreciate your question. And yes, the Sea Ice for Walrus Outlook is available on Facebook. So you can search for it through Facebook, or you can do a Google search for it, and it will also show you the option to go to the Facebook page. It's also available. The Arctic Research Consortium manages a SIWO webpage as well, so you can check that out.
There is a question.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, so I'm just seeing here, thank you, Lisa, for posting the links. Facebook.com/Sea Ice for Walrus.
Yep. And there's also another question in the chat box by Susan. Are there any job openings for Gamble?
Thank you, Susan. I will refer you to Lisa Sheffield Guy, who is on the call. Perhaps you can exchange information. But there is a SIWO observer right now for Gamble currently.
All right. So I guess my question is for Amy. What is the most sort of unexpected thing when you jumped into this project? What is the most unexpected thing that you've walked away with yourself regarding SIWO?
Regarding the SIWO?
Yeah, and your review and sort of what's been most unexpected.
I think I came into this project with just a really open mind. So this is a very social science directed project, and I am very much a climate weather scientist. So I think just all of the skills that I've learned about talking to people, about getting in touch with tribal offices, about just kind of this whole social element to doing science and making weather and climate science useful has been very interesting.
Awesome, very eye-opening, maybe.
Yeah.
You've been in Fairbanks, so very exciting. Very nice to show you around. This was the first time you've seen the sea ice?
First time, well, I saw the sea ice at 78 degrees north from a ship, but this is the first time I went out and stepped on the sea ice.
Yeah, all right.
So
Well,
they took me out
awesome.
on the ice earlier today.
Yeah. Do you have any questions?
Yeah, I'd like to have a conversation about how language in scientific forecasts can become easier to understand. And in my opinion, so please tell me when you disagree. It has to do with, I think, this power dynamic in what like this Western science considers science and forecast words. On the other side, for the folks listening, I work for the Weather Service, and oftentimes I'm learning about different words used for ice, and they are not in English. And so it's hard for me to understand. And the more I look into it, it's so fascinating to see how these words are really shaped by the way we come to know things. And it's so much inner work that we do to kind of understand like why we're using certain words to describe our jobs or what we're learning. And I'm always trying to figure out ways to lower the barriers. But I think a large part of it is still embedded in this, are you good enough to know what we know? Like you have to pay money to read our academic papers. You know, sometimes it's $35. You know, and so I just kind of think until maybe like knowledge is a little bit more like open sourced, there's going to be always this extreme barrier to know what I know or know what you know type of attitude. Did I do an okay job explaining that? Okay.
Here's my question. This is Gate. Does anyone have a comment? Kitty Salpow was just asking, I think anybody on the phone everywhere, her thoughts. Does anyone have any answer for her or thoughts that come to your mind?
I will say that, so as the local observers are writing up the reports, like they are encouraged to write in their own language. So they can write in local languages if they so choose, if they feel like that's what they want to do. Most of them do come in English, but local observer reports are for local observers. And so how do you want to present the data or the information or the observation?
So I have a question then on SIWO. If somebody writes from St. Lawrence Island in St. Lawrence Island, Yupik, and there's such knowledge of all the different types of ice. So there's a book written of all the different types, if I remember right. I think the Eskimo Walrus Commission might have had something to do with that, with drawings. And then but then would you use that language or those terms, or would you get ice terms from Diomede? Also, massive nuances in the different types of ice and the language, but different language. Or do you use, because you're National Weather Service, would you use, how does this, what are you thinking? Are you thinking in language in those terms too? Or
I'm thinking language,
yeah. Dynamic in this region. We have multiple languages, and so much of the expertise in the different types of ice, especially pertaining just to this dynamic region, is not in English.
In my opinion, I think I'm a human with a brain, and I'm thankful for that, and I'm able to learn. I think it's appropriate to use the words that are describing something of the land in which it's from. You know, so like if I'm describing something that a knowledge was like gained from a lab, I understand why I could use like a Latin word for something, because that's like the culture in which it was created. But when we're creating like these new multi-layered research projects that include knowledge from the community and like knowledge from the lab and observations, it might be kind of fun to explore like ways to create a new word to describe this new holistic view of ice. Or, you know, I'm just brainstorming here. Yeah.
Rick Toman put in the chat, first, the Metcalfs put in there, yes, there's 99 terms for sea ice, and so I would think that refers to St. Lawrence Island, St. Lawrence Island Yupik. Very exquisite, detailed understanding of many different types of ice. And then Rick Toman wrote, jargon, quote unquote, is a big problem when common words are used in a specialized sense. Thank you, Rick, for adding that. So
I don't know what the common words are used.
Like what you were saying. So if you say broken ice,
common words.
That'd be a common word.
Specialized meaning.
Yeah.
What does it mean? Okay,
what does it mean?
Got it.
Yeah,
thank you.
That's my understanding.
Yes.
So Opik has a question. Go ahead, Opik.
You'll have to unmute yourself.
Yeah, you'll have to unmute.
Oh, okay.
There you
Almost
go.
forgot that. Sorry about that.
No, it's all right.
I think it's gonna be really important for your observers. I know when people are interested in becoming a local observer, you know, they have that knowledge of ice conditions, right? But I also think that there's, you know, there might be new people who don't have that knowledge, you know, so much. So maybe to create some kind of ice chart, you know, of the different ice conditions, that might be helpful, you know, because we're seeing more young ice now than we did in the past, you know. Sometimes that ice, like right now, it's slushy, and I think Rick can tell us the type of ice that's the slushy ice. There's a name for it, a proper name. So there's a proper name for different types of ice. If we can get that and share with these ice observers, say, hey, this is sheet ice, and this is the rigid and rafting ice or pancake ice. You know, that kind of information would be important to have.
For the observers.
For the observers, yes. And then, you know, because then when you hold your meetings together with the other observers, you do your call-in, they'll all be on the same page of, yeah, we know which type of ice they're talking about. You know what I mean? I mean, does that make sense?
Yeah, sort of standardizing, at least in the English terminology.
Yep,
I know that.
Yeah.
Oh,
go ahead.
No,
go ahead.
So I know that another thing that might be helpful is if we had dictionaries for ice dictionaries in the languages for which that expertise lies. I know that Wales, Native Village of Wales, has a ice dictionary with photos and their words, the language for the Bering Strait and Inupiaq of Wales. I don't know if that dictionary for St. Lawrence Island is still available. I don't know if that was Eskimo Walrus Commission, but maybe we'll hear. Opik, your hand is still up, and also
I didn't mean to keep my hand still up, but just,
okay, that's okay.
You know,
then we'll go. Oh, go ahead, Opik.
Yeah, no, I think I'm good.
Okay.
Yep, sorry. How do I take the hand down?
It's down under reaction on the bottom with a little smiley face. And Stephen Lezak, hope I have that pronunciation right. Go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, Gay. I love the idea of a sea ice dictionary. I think that's great, and I'll also add, as an academic myself, sometimes we academics, when we're working in Indian country, have a bad habit of taking things that are really well known to the folks and communities where we're working in, and then we write it up in really fancy language and we publish it, and boom, it's science all of a sudden. And it's totally illegible to someone who doesn't have a PhD, but the gist of what we're saying is stuff that, you know, in the case of, for instance, the work that I do in the Norton Sound region, the real experts are all around me. And if anything, I am their student much more than I am an expert. And so I think it's really incumbent upon us to take the initiative and make sure that rather than reproduce the expertise of the people in our communities who are showing us their land and showing us their knowledge, that we make sure that our work materially contributes to them in a way that's extremely clear. Because if not, we can slide back into this same extractive paradigm that frankly has characterized 150 years of research in the region. And so looking specifically at, how can language here become easier to understand so that folks in the region are able to look at that language and get as much from it as possible. I think it's as simple as finding collaborators in the region who can look at it and say, yeah, this is unclear to me, or this is clear to me, but I don't think my grandma could understand it. And for instance, when I made my little one-page flyer that I hand out to people to tell them about my research, before I printed it off, I sent it to a friend and mentor of sorts in Savunga. And I said, what do you think about this? And, she said, oh, well, it looks pretty good, but I would change this and I would change that. And it was that simple. And so I think that's basically a process that we can mainstream in everything that we do as researchers, whether it is looking at something like language and scientific forecasts, whether it's creating plain English summaries of our publications, which we should absolutely do. You have your abstract, and then you have your plain English summary, and then you can have your, technical 8,000 words and all of that. But I think this is one of the most important steps we can take in terms of decolonizing our research.
Yeah, thank you, Stephen, for that comment.
Thank you for saying that.
Right on. All right. Any other questions? Did you want to go through any of these again and see if anyone online? I think we got the language one.
Yeah, we had a really good conversation about language. So I'm really thankful for that, everybody. If people had thoughts on the other two questions here, I'd be happy to hear them. But the second one here was, why is SIWO information useful after sea ice is gone? So why would information like satellite imagery, wind forecasts, temperature trends, local observations, why would that be important during the summer and fall? And then what would make the SIWO more useful overall? And we've talked a lot about language, and so definitely simplifying language or finding a common language would certainly make it more useful. But if there were other things that you might find to be helpful. Yes, Rick.
Yeah, thanks, Amy. Great presentation. So, I think one of the things that you brought out here in your discussions with people and presented tonight is one of the great things that people value about SIWO is that one-stop shop. And it's not like all of the weather information, at least, isn't available after the ice is gone. Of course it is. But you got to go to different places on the Weather Service site. If you want current information, then you got to go to a third-party app like windy.com. Stuff is scattered around. And the value of SIWO is that during that short season, it's pulling all this information together. And so I wonder if that's really the message here is people in the region are telling us that these one-stop shops this is the best, most efficient way to get information that's important to us.
Yeah, thanks, Rick. That's good. That's a good way to look at it. Just the what's the word I'm looking for? The convenience of it being all in one place.
Regionally relevant.
Regionally relevant information.
May be the important thing, because I know that well, what Rick does on his Facebook site. And so if people aren't aware, Rick Toman is with University of Alaska Fairbanks, Alaska Climate Assessment and Policy. And he has on Facebook the Bering Strait, what's it called, Rick? Seward Peninsula. Go for it. You must know it by heart. What is it? Seward Peninsula. Sorry, Rick. But anyway, there's a Facebook site dedicated to the Bering Strait region regarding weather. And that's really, it is one-stop shopping. And if you lived in Bristol Bay, they harvest walrus in Bristol Bay. If you live in Utqiagvik, people harvest walruses in Utqiagvik, but that's not what is helpful. I don't know how far I saw your map. How far does SIWO go?
Oh, was Wales the furthest north?
Yeah, Wales might have been the furthest north and to the south. Yeah, thank you, Rick. It's the Seward, his Facebook site is Seward Peninsula, Bering Strait Weather and Climate Info. And I invite everyone to go to that and check that out. Seward Peninsula, Bering Strait Weather and Climate Info. But on your, can you go back to your map? Okay, so you have Shishmaref to basically St. Lawrence Island. So this is really for the SIWO, it is really convenient and one-stop shopping for the Bering Strait region. All of those communities, Shishmaref, Diomede, Wales, Brevik, Gnome, Gamble, Savunga, those are all in the Bering Strait region. So this is helpful regionally, very relevant. If, for example, there was a SIWO that was somehow regionally different, or there was somebody doing like a Facebook page for Kotzebue, right? That would be the Arctic Northwest Borough region. And if you went further up, it would be the North Slope Borough, or if you went further south, it would be the Yukon Kuskokwim Delta. Each region, I mean, I find this again and again, we see it in the Bering Strait region, is that we have an existing communication network. And it works out really well if you are regionally focused in on an area. And that is what is helpful to make that one-stop shopping for a region. Because what is published or known about the ice, if Gamble says this or that, it means a lot to the communities upstream, like Diomede and Wales and Brevik. But does it mean the same to Selawik? Probably not, right? Or does it mean the same to Hooper Bay? Maybe. But those are different communication networks. And that's something to think about. So thank you. Regionally relevant, I would say. SIWO is really a Bering Strait. Now that I see this map, it's really a Bering Strait region project. So, yeah, Lisa Sheffield Guy put in the chat box, there's an Alaska Arctic Observatory. So that's a different regional observer program for the North, it looks like. And she puts the website in. For those on the phone, how would you get there, Lisa?
I think just you could do
they have a Facebook?
They have a Facebook.
Okay.
So she posted the link to the Facebook page. But again, that's Alaska Arctic Observatory and Knowledge Hub for those on the phone.
Right. And I'm wondering if we're talking with the National Weather Service representative here, is this something that eventually could these SIWO or Alaska Arctic Observatory and Knowledge Hub, is this something that, you know, the National Weather Service has solid funding, right? They get funded any old year. So are they, you know, they're important for the nation. Is it the kind of thing that the Alaska, I just don't know. Is it something the Alaska National Weather Service could have these regional observing networks under their umbrella so that people could go, bang, I live in Shaktoolik, I'm going to go to the regionally relevant weather place. Is that, what does anyone think of that online from the Bering Strait region, or am I talking crazy?
Well, Rick Toman just added
This is Cheryl. You know, I'm real big at weather and storms and stuff, and I try to get the word out, and I'm real big about safety for people. And I really appreciate Rick's Facebook page. I'm really grateful to learn about this page and these other regional good information for our region, especially because we have no weather observatory locally. You know, they're not fixed or anything. So I'm really excited about these, and I really appreciate everybody's work and effort and other entities that put these things together so that we could observe and be prepared for our weather and stuff here.
Cheryl, we have
she's from Campbell.
Oh, Campbell.
Thank you, Cheryl. This is Gabe. Good to hear your voice.
Yes, thank you, Cheryl. And it's good to know that these types of, the Facebook pages and the regionally relevant weather and climate information is useful. That's something that, as scientists, it's like good to hear.
All right.
Awesome.
Go ahead. What's that?
No, I was just saying I appreciate thank you guys for all this great info. It really does help us out here, and a lot of hunters, I believe, go to this website, and yeah.
Yeah, that's really great to hear, Orlin. Thank you.
How often is it updated?
Yeah, so the SIWO is updated once per week, and it's put out Fridays at noon. And I know that when you do go, if it's not Friday and you want information about Monday, because it's Monday, you can click on the National Weather Service links that are provided in the SIWO also and get more up-to-date forecasts. And Rick added another resource if folks are interested. He says the Alaska Marine Exchange Weather Station at Gamble is online, but it's not easy to interpret. So there we are, having a language barrier again, perhaps.
Right, how it's communicated. Probably lots of kind of more like aviation type.
Perhaps.
I don't know.
And that is a big problem. This is Rick. Yeah, so yes, the information's out there, but again, who is this intended for? Who is the audience? If you're going to put it in a format that you have to be basically a specialist in order to understand it, that, okay, if that's what you want to do, but recognize that's what you want to, that's what you're doing. Just having some data and, oh, it's online, so you can get it. That's not good enough.
Yeah, thank you, Rick. I appreciate that. A lot of times there are opportunities to, oh, well, it is online, but if I don't know how to read it, it's not very useful to me. But I need the weather just like a pilot might need the weather, so yeah, it's better if it's in a easier to absorb understanding format, relevant format. So are you getting what you need, Amy, in this?
The fact that we're having a conversation about the SIWO and about what's useful out here, like this is exactly what I'm hoping for. So thank you again, everybody. This has been a very fruitful discussion.